Hi there, my name is Eric Mader. I'm the Agile Practice Lead for AHEAD. Welcome to our Fall Data Summit 2021. The topic of this session today is how you can actually apply DevOps and Agile thinking to data analytics work and projects. This is based upon a particular challenge. So within an organization today, any organization, frankly, the ability to produce high quality digital products faster is an absolute imperative. And any organization right nowadays is a digital organization. So accelerated innovation of those digital products and those digital tools is no longer optional. Organizations that are actually able to do this are innovate faster, are the ones that are actually able to thrive and remain competitive in a digital economy. For any organization today, data analytics is absolutely no exception to this rule. Data analytics is perhaps the most important and critical digital product that any organization has under its purview. So what is data analytics? Data analytics is the science of analyzing data to find conclusions that help organizations optimize performance and make business decisions. So for what this actually means, right, is business leaders have particular questions that they need answers to. Those answers will guide the organization. They will guide critical decisions that need to be made that keep the organization, like I mentioned, competitive in the marketplace, but also just frankly a fantastic place to work. It involves the transformation of raw data. Organizations have all these raw data sources, all these products that actually have data tied to them, and taking that raw data and consuming it into a digestible format fit for human consumption. What do these formats generally look like? Well, generally they include reports and dashboards, but certainly not limited to that, right? So they could be proprietary data analytics tools. They could be proprietary reporting or analytics platforms. But generally it involves taking raw data that someone who's not technical would struggle to take a look at and find the answers to their questions based upon it, digests it, analyzes it, and puts it in a format that they can easily consume. Now, data analytics teams today are facing certain specific realities that pose very specific challenges. First of all, data is usually tied now to products, and this is becoming a major problem, or a major challenge, I should say, especially as we start talking about the cloud. If you go and you purchase Microsoft 365, it has its own data layer. The data layer is specific to Microsoft 365. It's not something that you can go to Microsoft and say, hey, we want to deploy this on our DB2 or our Oracle on-premise platform. They would totally laugh at you. It's data is now tied to specific products, and the products are actually driving the data platform. And different technical expertise is actually required to leverage that data. It's not, it's not something where you can have generic experts or engineers or what have you that are specific to particular products. They now have to know particular APIs, particular languages in order to be able to leverage that data. Another reality too is that not every insight requested is a priority. There's sort of this assumption within an organization that the higher up the org chart you go, the more important and the more critical those insights that are being requested are. And that's not just, frankly, just isn't the case. Not every insight is actually needed long term. There's certain questions that leaders within an organization are going to ask that are just frankly going to be more critical than others. And likewise, right, organizations, and for good reason, are frequently subject to regulations and laws. It's important to protect data. It's important to make sure that you're actually following, the specific regulations and laws within your geographical region. So, for example, in Europe, they have, they have GDPR. Here in the U.S., we have things like SOX, HIPAA, a myriad of different organization and industry specific regulations that just frankly need to be followed regardless of any particular methodology. So the way that organizations, given these realities, tend to handle data analytics work is very specific and actually, frankly, somewhat old school. Insights are generally built as projects. So projects that are, you bring in a team, they're there for a set duration of time. Maybe you're using your FTEs within your organization. Maybe you're using contractors. Maybe it's a blending of those. But the idea is that you give them sort of a set of requirements, a set of different insights that you need a solution for. They work on it for a fixed amount of time, and then they go away, right? Or maybe you keep the core team around, and but the complexion, the original complexion of that team changes after a set fixed interval. These teams are also generally kept in silos, right? And they're given full governance control. And this is not even necessarily specific to analytics or data analytics, but specific to data in general, right? So data teams generally are kept off in their sort of island, I like to call it, within the organization, with the idea that like, yep, we need to remain, for example, SOX compliant. So that data team is going to just do that for us. We don't have to worry about it in other facets of our organization. For this reason, then, traditional project management methodologies such as waterfall are used under the assumption that, at the end of the day, whoever's actually requesting these insights or whomever is actually asking these questions actually knows what answers they need. And that's totally counter to the reality of data analytics work. But we're making that assumption that, whomever is consuming these insights, whomever the end customer is, knows what they already need. Their priorities will never actually change, that they'll never ask any other questions, or if they do, it'll be just a couple of things. And this is a reality, right, that allows us to be able to use traditional project methodologies such as waterfall. So obviously this creates many problems. The most critical of first of all, first delivery, those insights are often delivered very, very late in the project. If we have someone that, we have a team that goes off, we give them a scope of work, we give them a set of requirements, they build and execute on that sort of in a black box, maybe 6, 12 months down the road, they deliver something, during that time, a lot of, time is passing. So the first delivery, those insights are often delivered very, very late in the project. And at that point, those insights may no longer be relevant or even frankly accurate. New data may be collected, new things may have changed in the marketplace, and those changes are not actually taken into account with the work that team did. And like I mentioned, the original team that built the insights is no longer intact. So if bugs come up, new insights are needed, new questions are being asked by leaders in the organization, even simple things, right, like data sources being refreshed, the team is no longer intact to actually do that work. Likewise, a large quantity of interdependencies end up being a large quantity of interdependencies with product teams are actually created. So for example, if we have a team now that's like, let's go back to the Microsoft 365 example, we need data from Microsoft 365. We have to now reach out to that team. We have to get on their timeline. We have to make sure that we're getting in their backlog. And that may take time, right? It may be 3, it may be 6 months before they can even get back to us. So these large interdependencies just create further delays and further delay the delivery of those insights that we're delivering upon with our solution. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but product owners also now do not have governance over the data portion of the product stack. And when we say, product stack, what we actually mean is product owners and cross-functional teams need the ability to actually deliver upon their solutions, but deliver upon them end to end, right? So the team that actually is designing, is building, is testing, and then ultimately delivering something is the one that, needs to have a full technology stack as much as they possibly can in order to deliver upon that. Now, Agile and DevOps can actually help solve all of these problems. And what I'll say is it's not a silver bullet. It's not a magic bullet, right? It'll help with the people and processes side of things, but it won't necessarily solve some of the technology and, processes and framework side of it. And frankly, that's bigger than this discussion here today. We'll focus just on the people and processes side of it. But Agile and DevOps will help, I would say, 60 to 70% of these problems. The rest of it really is more of a tools play, like I said, which we won't get into in this session here today. So before we talk about how this actually applies to data analytics work specifically, it's important to talk about, just level set, right? Well, what do we actually mean by Agile and DevOps? Well, in order to understand that, we need to understand that all work actually falls into one of 5 categories. Generally, we assume that work falls into what we call the simple categories in the lower right-hand side. In this circumstance, end goals, we consider them to be very well understood, right? And the paths to get there are followed often. It's very, very clear that we can task out what specifically needs to happen in order for us to actually achieve our goals. And so this is actually where waterfall works really, really well, right? So we can flesh out specific end requirements. We know we can task out what specifically needs to actually happen there and deliver upon something that meets those goals. Now, what I like to say with simple is, simple doesn't mean that it isn't hard, right? It isn't difficult, or there isn't effort required to actually get there. I actually like to describe simple work as, for example, let's say we're building a housing subdivision, right? And so when we have customers come in, we give them a brochure. There's 5 or 6 different housing models that they can choose from. They pick one, they pick a lot, and all we have to do is execute upon whichever plan on a timeline to build that house so they can move in, right? So that's an example of more of a simple work, or just a simple project. We know where we're trying to get to. We have all of the defined plans that we've proven out with multiple houses right in the subdivision already. We just need to go execute upon it and deliver upon it. The reality, however, is that work with an organization generally always falls into one of the top two. So complex, where we do not understand our end goals. We need to prove out some hypotheses and prove that those hypotheses are correct, and therefore help us define what our end goals actually are. Or they're complicated, right? We understand what the end goals actually are, but there's many different paths we can actually follow to get to those goals. So we just need to do some analysis, maybe figure out which path is the right way to go, and then follow that path. The reality is that data analytics work specifically is always by nature complex. And this is the whole core of why we do data analytics work. If we knew what our answers were, if we knew what we're actually driving towards, we understand what our questions are, but if we knew how to answer them, we wouldn't need to do data analytics. We wouldn't have to take our data, analyze it, and figure out what those answers are. So by nature, data analytics work is always going to fall into that complex category. Now, an important aside here, right, is that if you don't know what your goals are, if you don't know any possible paths for getting there, if you can't even ask the questions, right, you don't even know what the questions that you need answered are, you're in that middle portion, which we call disorder, and no methodology, be it waterfall, will solve disorder. The problem is that organizations will generally always use waterfall to solve all 5 of these. When it's important to understand that waterfall is only meant for that lower right corner, simple. Data analytics work is always complex. Most work within your organization is going to be either complex or complicated. Chaotic is more when you know what your end goals are and you just need to kind of get there right away. Think like data breaches or security incidents or things like that. You need to stop the bleeding. That's really more, we obviously won't cover that here today, but there's certainly frameworks that can help in those circumstances. So Agile. So Agile is meant to really help solve complex problems. And at its core, Agile is not a specific framework. It's not a specific methodology. It really is just at its core a set of values that we need to adopt as an organization, right? So what we mean by that is individuals' interactions, working technologies or working outputs, end user collaboration, and responding to change is valued higher than processes and tools, comprehensive documentation, negotiating contracts, and strictly following plans. Now, it's important to clarify here that what we're saying is the items on the right-hand side, what we're not saying is the items on the right-hand side do not have any value. We still need to follow a plan, right? We still, as an organization, need to figure out what is our North Star, what are we actually driving towards, what are priorities that are going to get us there. But what we are saying is that the items on the right-hand side are less important than the items on the left-hand side. So, for example, strictly following a 6 to 12 month project plan, just because we set out a plan, is not more important than responding to changes, especially changes that we know about. If we know that something perhaps in the marketplace has changed, or there's a new question that's being asked by leadership, we should be able to respond to those quickly and right away. We're not saying that we don't document anything, for example, right? We still have a need for documentation, but we don't want documentation to become the illusion that we're actually getting something done and we're delivering value. We would rather focus our attention on delivering working technologies, working output over comprehensively documenting everything and then showing that and saying, hey, look, we documented it, it's good to go. Behind this set of values is a set of core principles, and they're across delivery, collaboration, teamwork, and excellence. I won't go into these into super detail. In fact, you can go out to agilemanifesto.org and read all of these on your own. But I'll point out just a couple, right? So first of all, the most important priority is early and continuous delivery of working technologies that solve problems for end users. This is super, super critical for data analytics work in particular. Between the time when we have the question asked to when we deliver an insight that answers the question, time is passing and time is of the essence. Because new data is being collected, things are changing out there in this sort of dynamic world of ours, right? So we can't just assume that it's going to be acceptable for us to go away into a black box, work on something for months or even years, then deliver something and expect it to answer the question given the new realities of the world out there. Business and technology people must work together daily. It's not acceptable for, frankly, even outside of data analytics, right? It's not acceptable for any project team to just go away, work in a black box, and then expect what they're going to deliver at the end of the day to actually drive the correct business value, right? It's, business and technology people must work together daily. There needs to be that feedback loop to ensure that what the team is working on is actually the right things. So what is DevOps? And it's important that we talk about this because organizations always have different definitions for DevOps. So it's important to kind of clarify what we're talking about DevOps and how we're actually answering that and defining that here today. So DevOps at its core is a mindset, a culture, and a set of practices that deliver value faster and are regularly with more reliability. So it's a mindset, it's a culture, and a set of practices. A lot of organizations actually sort of incorrectly define this as, oh, we have infrastructure as code. Infrastructure as code is DevOps. Now, that isn't necessarily incorrect, right? So DevOps or infrastructure as code is an important tool set and an important set of tools to have for a DevOps. But DevOps really is the idea that at its very core, that if you build something, if there's a team that actually puts something and builds, tests, and releases something that people are actually consuming and using out there in the world, that they're also on the hook for monitoring, planning any new solutions based upon the feedback that they get from those end users, those consumers of their tool or what have you. DevOps is really more of that core concept, right? It's the idea that you're delivering something and you're also around to continue and react to feedback loops on that work. It's what this basically means at its core is that DevOps teams or teams that are practicing DevOps can't just go away, right? They're there for the long haul. They may have a sort of an initial set of scope that they're delivering upon, and that may be your data analytics tool solution, for example, but they're going to be there to be able to continue monitoring and planning and being able to tackle new insights based upon feedback that you get. So while many DevOps patterns actually do require automation, and automation is certainly a good core component to it, DevOps is primarily a set of cultural norms and that allow for the shared goals to be achieved throughout the IT value stream. And we'll talk about that in just a bit. So how Agile works. So one reality with Agile, and really with any project that we take on, is that we're always going to have some sort of a client that thinks they know what they want, right? And we're never going to be able to do something about this. They're going to come to us and say, hey, you know what? I have these business questions that I need answered, or I have this business problem that I need a solution for. I think you need to do this to give me that solution and solve the problem for me. So instead of just saying, okay, we'll go build that for you, let's flesh out a set of requirements and run those by you and get your sign up of them. What we do is we work with them and we actually set forth a set of value hypotheses, right? So we set up a set of initial hypotheses and map them in what we call a backlog, and it's ranked, right? So it's ranked by priority. Highest priority items are ones that are going to drive the highest amount of business value in the shortest amount of time. The stuff at the bottom is the stuff that's going to drive lower business value, or maybe no business value, frankly, that we'll get to later, but it's not a priority for right now. And what we do is we actually have a cross-functional team that then iterates on this, right? They iterate on the highest value. What they do is we call these sprints. They'll commit to the highest set of business hypotheses that we have. They'll work on those, and then they'll deliver sort of an incremental solution based on just that high top set of business value hypotheses. So what we can do then is show those to our stakeholders, show those to our clients, show those to our customers, and say, hey, this is what we put forth. This is what we think is actually going to answer your question. This is what's actually going to solve your business problem. So we have first delivery of some solution that they can react to in a very short amount of time. So there's sort of rapid realization of business value. The reason we do this, right, is because we don't want to find out, if we do a project, right, that lasts, let's say, 8 months, we don't want to deliver something to them in 8 months and then have them tell us, shoot, this is totally off base from what I actually need. This is not going to solve my problem at all. What we want to do is, at the worst case scenario, fail fast. So if we're going to fail, we're only going to fail, based on our 2 to 3 week sprint. We're not going to spend 8 months and then fail at that time. So if we're going to fail right away, but we're going to learn from that failure. We're going to pivot. We're going to figure out, okay, what's maybe another solution that will actually solve their problem based upon their feedback. So for this reason, Agile projects tend to be obviously more in line with budget expectations. But at the end of the day, our client, our end user, our stakeholder is going to get exactly what they want because we're considering their feedback throughout the process on a regular cadence. And it's important to know that team level Agile doesn't scale just on its own. There is something called Agile at scale. We'll talk about that in a little bit in some of our solutions here. But the core concept, right, is that we have team level Agile, which is a single team, generally between 4 to 10 people. We call this like a two pizza team that's actually working in a tactical controlled environment that has a product owner mapped to it. But there's also Agile at scale, right, which is basically Agile that's mapped to many Agile teams. So it's basically like a team of teams concept. So we have multiple Agile teams that are working across the board to deliver kind of a common set of value. There's multiple products, multiple stakeholders that they're working with, and there's a strong governance model in place to make sure that the highest priority work is being tackled across the entire organization. So what does this look like? Looks like something like this. So we generally have what are called value streams. And there's different frameworks out there. Some of you may be familiar with SAFe, the Scaled Agile framework. There's also Spotify, which has this sort of idea of tribes. SAFe has the idea of an art or a release train. But there's sort of a value stream, right? a stream of value that we're trying to deliver upon. And what we have is multiple Agile teams that are committed to delivering that value. And so all of these Agile teams are actually marching to the beat of the same drum. So they're working on the same cadence. They have quarterly or maybe annual planning that they're all a part of, but they're all committed to delivering sort of a set bit of value. And each one of these teams is actually mapped to a particular product or products. So you could, for example, have a value stream that's tied to your digital collaboration tools within your organization. So maybe Agile Team 1 is tied to, Miro or digital whiteboarding tools. Team 2 is tied to, WebEx. Team 3 is tied to your Microsoft collaboration suite, for example. But they're all tied to very specific products. And membership is long running, right? So we're not disbanding these teams. They're sticking together for the long run because, for example, when we have a problem with Microsoft collaboration tools, we're going to know to go out to Agile Team 3, and they're going to be available there to either build a new feature or solution for us or figure out a problem, and they're not just going to disband, right? They're not just going to all of a sudden be gone. So let's wrap this all together. So how does this actually work? How does data analytics work tend to fit into the picture? So what most organizations tend to do is they tend to create what's called a data island or data islands, and data analytics tends to be one of those islands, right? They'll set up a project, they'll flesh out requirements, and they'll keep that team generally away from any of the other value streams in the organization. Now, to be fair, these islands may use an agile methodology, right? But generally, by and large, what we see within our work is they are using some sort of like a waterfall or very traditional project management approach. And the idea, right, is that they're here. We're going to give them as many requirements as they can. They're going to execute on many of those as they can, deliver something at the end of the day, and then kind of going to go away, right? Or they'll, like I said, they'll keep that sort of core team around. And the reason this is generally done, we talked about all the different regulatory requirements and things like that, but organizations used to be structured as silos, and many still are. Don't get me wrong, but data used to be one of those silos, right? We used to have a software development silo. We used to have an operations silo. We used to have a testing silo. We used to have a data center silo, and we also used to have a data silo as well. And many organizations, like I mentioned, still do it this way. And this worked really well when we were still working in that sort of methodology. But the reality is that organizations aren't really structured this way anymore, right? Like, for example, you don't just have organizations that say, hey, you know what? We're a DB2 shop. We only use IBM AIX servers. We have a central DB2 team. We'll set up a database for you and you can use that, but we're not going to support or let you do anything else. In some cases, like I said, this is still somewhat true, but the reality is that data is now tied to, that data layer is now tied to specific products, and there's very little organizations can actually do about this. So data now resides out where the products are tied to these sort of value cross-functional agile teams that are out there. So why is this a problem? Well, first of all, obviously this is risky because first of all, you can't just all of a sudden say, you know what, my data group is now going to handle all my GDPR requirements. I don't have to worry about it, right? The product teams now need to know what GDPR is, how to handle it, things of that nature. It's not as simple as just saying, we got a team out there doing it for us. We don't have to worry about it. All teams now have to have that built-in sort of expertise, that understanding that GDPR, for example, is something that we need to adhere to. But this also creates a lot of interdependencies, right? So we have these teams, like I mentioned, that are working they're marching it to the beat of the same drum. They have a cadence. They have some planning that they do on either a quarterly or annual basis. And it's difficult for some sort of outside group to just come in and say, hey, you know what? I need data from your product. Go get that data for me. They may say, okay, well, you know what? We'll get to it, but you know what? You're going to go into our backlog. You're not on our radar for right now. It may be 2 to 3 months before we're able to actually deliver that to you. So meanwhile, this data analytics project team is spinning cycles, right? They're waiting for some of this data to be delivered, and eventually it will be delivered. But there's also a problem of data cleanliness, right? So the data analytics project team may get data from one of these agile teams, but it may be in the wrong encoding, it may be in the wrong format, it may be the incorrect data, and then all of a sudden we're back to square one. We have to put the request in, get the right data given the requirements that team needs. So this definitely leads to a problem, right? And just the mere sense of exporting that data sometimes creates problems. There's tons of examples out there in the world, in the industry, of where a S3 bucket may have been misconfigured or data was emailed to someone who shouldn't have received it. So exporting the data and moving outside of the value stream tied to these individual teams is super risky and opens up presents a lot of challenges within organizations. Okay, so how do we actually now do this in an agile way? What's the punchline here? So first of all, there's specific needs for data analytics deliveries, right? So data analytics, there's a reality that you need to prioritize the work that's actually going to deliver the highest business value. And generally, like I mentioned, this is in the form of specific questions that are being asked. We need to prioritize the highest priority questions and not focus on the ones that are just frankly not going to deliver business value. Time is also of the essence, right? If we let too much time go by, that we increase the likelihood that insights are no longer valid. The world's changing. New questions are going to pop up. Realities just aren't always going to be the same, and we can't assume that they're going to stay that way. So what we need is the ability to have some sort of a feedback loop. We need the ability to inspect and adapt what has already been delivered and figure out if we're actually answering the questions based on our hypotheses. We have to prove that our hypotheses are actually correct. Likewise, our team can't just disappear because new insights are always going to be needed. This goes back to the idea of DevOps. The problem is that waterfall methodologies are ill-equipped to handle any of these needs for data analytics deliveries. So data analytics really is conducive to Agile. And so how does this actually work on a team level? So first of all, that reality we talked about earlier, that the client thinks that they know what they want. They kind of have already come with the answers, but they have core questions that they need solved. This is a given. This is something that's a reality for any project, not just data analytics. So what a data analytics team generally does is they answer what's called the unbroken chain of why. So they'll actually go to the client, they'll go to stakeholders, whomever is the key people asking the question, and they'll keep asking why. Why do you need to know the answer to that? Okay, but why do you need to know the answer to that? Okay, but why do you need to know the answer to that? And by doing that, generally you'll, 4 or 5 times of asking why, you'll get to the core question. You'll get to the core reason of, what question they need, and you'll develop sort of some hypotheses around potential solutions that answer that question. So what teams will then do is they will represent it as a list of prioritized questions. We call this a backlog. And what they'll do over the course of sprint is that the cross-functional team analyzes the data, builds insights, and then validates it with the end users or the stakeholders. So the first answers are delivered very early in the process. They may not be right, and that's totally fine, but at least we haven't wasted very much time, and we can pivot and we can figure something else out. But chances are good that we actually have answered the question. So all of a sudden now, leaders are able to go out and actually use the insights that we provided them and make business decisions right away. A very small amount of time has actually passed, rather than being in this sort of black box where the client can provide feedback later on down the road. So how does this work at scale? So there's basically a couple of options. So first of all, you can create what's called a data analytics agile team. So you can actually have a team plugged into the value stream that is part of the cadence with all the other agile teams in that value stream. The pros of doing this right is that you have a cross-functional, long-running team that is a clearly defined product owner. You have a data analytics product owner. You're part of the value stream, but it's also a data analytics offering, right? So the value stream, in addition to, like, let's say, digital collaboration tooling, is that you also have digital collaboration specific analytics and insights that you're able to provide. It's very, very clear that if you have a question tied to data, to digital collaboration, you can go right to that value stream, and that's one of the offerings that they're able to provide the business. Now, there are cons to this, in that it doesn't actually solve all of what we call the problem with the island, right? That separate island data analytics team, and that product owners can still disconnect themselves from the data governance component of the product. They can say, you know what, we got a team that's handling the data side of my product. I don't need to worry about that. This is okay if the value stream has data that is specific and tied to the value stream, but it obviously is problematic if you still have to export data, right? If you still have to, for example, Agile teams 1 through 5 have to somehow export their data over to that data analytics Agile team. This is also obviously a hindrance to innovation. It's difficult to add another product to the value stream that has different data residency, right? If the data is all restricted within the value stream, you don't have other work streams that need to leverage that data platform or leverage that data platform in a different way, then this works. But if you don't have that, it presents a key challenge. So here's a better approach. And this is the approach that I do recommend moving forward with if you're considering this, right? Make a data analytics chapter and assign someone to actually be the lead of that chapter. So what this chapter is responsible for, right, is setting guardrails. So things like SOX, HIPAA, all those different regulations. You have a chapter lead that's ensuring that the data analytics solution across all of your Agile teams is being met. So pros of this obviously is that you have product owners that are now responsible for the full stacks. They can deliver end to end. There's data guardrails that are being enforced consistently across products. You have data analytics experts that have an opportunity to be T-shaped. We won't get too much into that, but it's the idea that they're now part of a cross-functional team, and they can understand most effectively how the data layer works for that product. And interdependencies are almost non-existent, right? They can be resolved within the team. There's no reason to go out to other teams or other silos within the organization to resolve those. Now, what's really important to understand here is that chapter leads are not product owners. They do not have a backlog. Data analytics questions are instead being framed to the product specific owner, and that's through the value stream methodology. So for example, a financials product owner is now being asked questions about financials. HR product owners being asked questions about HR. They're not being sent to a discrete data analytics team that may be lacking the specific product context, right? However, one big con still remains in that this doesn't always scale well beyond the value stream. So for this, what we generally recommend is setting up what's called a data analytics center of excellence. And what this center of excellence is actually responsible for is advising on the specific best practices and setting guardrails org-wide. So what they'll do is they'll actually hold regular touch points. The chapter lead will map into that COE. But what the COE does not do is they do not deliver insights in and of themselves. That's still out with all the Agile teams that are product specific. But what they are responsible for is maintaining a centralized repository of expertise and best practices across all of the value streams in an organization. But they are also primarily responsible for data analytics tooling, right? So chapter leads will generally participate and say, hey, look, we'll go back to the digital collaboration example, this is what we're doing, and there's sort of a centralized center of expertise that they're checking into on a regular cadence. So tools like Dataiku, that's something you can definitely leverage as a centralized COE, but actually using tools like Dataiku to get insights and build solutions, that is out within the value stream. So some key takeaways here, right? So data analytics work, like as we talked about, is generally not simple work, and it rarely ever is. Therefore, frameworks conducive to solving simple problems such as waterfall will not work. Agile and DevOps are a shift in a mindset of how organizations deliver business value, and it's by no means new. The Agile Manifesto, like we talked about, has been around since 2002. The Agile and DevOps no longer have to prove themselves. It's the way that organizations are going, and many organizations have adopted Agile and DevOps ways of working across many different areas of their business to drive and deliver the key business value. Team level Agile, like we talked about, doesn't scale on its own. Agile at scale isn't needed, but data analytics expertise does need to follow that at scale model. It can't be an island off on its own, doing its own thing, trying to get interdependencies with all these other groups. And data analytics chapters and COEs are elegant solutions that will help scale this across multiple different value streams. Thank you, and I will now answer any questions you may have.